All right. I think we are live. I'm going to give this just 1 second to make sure we are live everywhere. Takes a minute to go all the way through. Live on YouTube now. All right. Hey, everybody. Tina-Desiree Berg here. It is Friday, the Friday before Halloween. That means it's October 27th. And it is also my birthday tomorrow, October 28th. But today we are going to talk about dark money in politics. Particularly, we're going to go take a look at some of the dark money funding anti-vaccine movements and also anti-climate change now. And to do that with me is Walker Bragman. Welcome, Walker, to the show. You know Walker from Opt Out News, Important Context, a few other publications. Your latest piece is actually in Rolling Stone. Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. I want to promote, though, your current new opt-out media now. That's where Important Context is all folded into that, right? Is my understanding?
Yeah, I realized that dividing my attentions between, the newsletter where I would do all my reporting and my media nonprofit was kind of silly. Like, don't what's the line? Like, don't half-ass two things. Like, whole ass one thing.
One.
So,
yeah. So all right, that's fair.
Yeah. So now Important Context is becoming the news publication for opt-out. We're transferring opt-out originals to Important Context.
Oh, okay. So it's the opposite. I was thinking it was the other way. All right, right on. That's very cool. And but the app is still going to be fully functional.
Oh yeah. That's not changing. The app is fully functional. We're currently it's undergoing sort of a redesign that's slowly taking place. Our website is there's a lot going on, but yeah, we've got a few things in the works.
Right on.
And original reporting, I'm proud to say, is one of them.
That's awesome. We need more investigative journalism out there. So today we're going to talk about donor-advised funds. Last time you were on the show, we actually briefly discussed these, but you have continued to delve into them and the dark money that surrounds them. So donor-advised funds, I'm going to read this so for people can understand exactly what this is. Donor-advised funds have become a popular vehicle for wealthy individuals and foundations to distribute cash and remain under the radar. Functionally, these entities operate as pass-through organizations. Donors deposit money into an account managed by a DAF, or a donor-advised fund, like Fidelity Charitable. So Fidelity Bank, obviously, this is a big investment bank, trading firm, trading platform, the whole nine, which disperses it with the donor's input. While donor clients advise the sponsor has full legal control of the money and where it ends up. Typically, the sponsor's board of trustees has the final say. But then when you try to delve into donations on this, you can't figure out where the money's coming from. It's perfectly hidden. So it is honestly the perfect vehicle. If you're a wealthy individual and you want to fund something and you don't want people to know that this is where you're placing your money, it's an easy way to do it.
Status Coup giving tips for wealthy people how to hide their spending and influence. They never thought I'd see the day.
No, don't do the opposite. So I wanted to put up your latest. This is about RFK Jr., who was running as a Democrat for president, and he's now running independent. But I often say on the show, right-wing insanity isn't exclusively for Republicans, because it's not. So the way I look at right-wing insanity is based on theoretical practices or how people are behaving, things that they're doing, right? Not necessarily how they self-identify politically. So this was something you did in context with Rolling Stone magazine. You looked into some of the biggest charities and how they were basically bankrolling RFK Jr.'s anti-vaccine foundation. It's a charitable foundation he has, correct?
Yeah. So, well, technically, it's a charitable foundation. And this is sort of the thing that underlies this article, is that the IRS grants nonprofit status, 501c nonprofit status, to a bunch of groups that are not really charitable. And maybe that'll be a future piece. But like, you've got hate groups that are considered charities. You've got anti-vax groups that are considered charities. You've got blatantly political groups that, like the Heritage Foundation, which are considered charities. And so that's sort of the underlying problem that our article sort of touches on.
So let's go through some of this. Hang on, let me pull this up. Let me pull up the non-Rolling Stone one, but the one that's on your particular site. America's biggest charities.
We don't believe in paywalls.
Right.
Important context. All the news is just out there. You want it? It's there.
It's there. I know that Rolling Stone put your article behind the paywall, so I'm like, wait. All right, so here goes. In April 2020, as the first wave of the deadly coronavirus pandemic was breaking across the United States, the largest charitable fund in the country, Fidelity Charitable, announced a plan to mitigate the crisis. As the nation's largest grant maker, Fidelity Charitable is committed to supporting the nonprofit sector and the communities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as to enable our nearly 250,000 donors to respond effectively to the many needs emerging daily. The fund, which distributed, wait for it, $11.2 billion, which is an insane amount of money, in grants last year and is affiliated with Fidelity Investments, declared. To that end, Fidelity Charitable said it would establish a trustee-led minimum 1 million initiatives to support COVID response efforts and provide donors with guidance and resources to enable them to best direct their money amid the worst pandemic in a century. Where did that money actually go, though, Walker? Did it go into supporting folks that maybe lost their jobs? Did it go into buying N95 masks for people that were in the healthcare sector to protect themselves with? Where did that money go?
So I want to be clear about something. These groups, these donor advised funds do distribute a hell of a lot of money. And most of that money, I would say, goes to, legitimate charities or right, whatever, you would consider a legitimate charity. Yeah. Versus, what I would, I got you. Most of that money is legitimately spent.
Okay.
But some of that money, a fraction of the total amount, but a sizable amount for these groups, has gone to groups like RFK's Children's Health Defense or Del Bigtree's Informed Consent Action Network, two prolific anti-vaccine groups, right, or Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, which is
that's the doctor one.
Yeah, it's a doctor group that is known for promoting quack COVID treatments.
Yeah. Like Simone Gold, I believe, is associated with
that. No, that's America's Frontline Doctors.
Oh, America's Frontline Doctors.
Dr. Pierre Corey.
Okay.
And they've got a host of issues as well. Like, these are groups that really dabble in, or deal in misinformation and right, have spread some really damaging narratives about COVID vaccines and the virus itself. And they're, the donations that go through these donor advised funds, those are tax deductions for the donor.
So like they're getting a tax write-off, right?
Like let's say I'm a wealthy conservative or whoever, and I want to direct my money to a hate group or an anti-vaccine group, and I go through a donor advised fund, I'm getting a tax write-off because the money that I'm giving over legal control of the money to the donor advised fund sponsor. So that's the end of my official involvement. But then I retain this sort of privilege to tell them where the money should go. And these funds don't have policies in place to screen out some of these horrible groups. So I'm getting, effectively what's happening is I'm getting a tax write-off to give to this horrible group. And yeah, that's perfectly legal.
Yeah, this is crazy. So like, say, for example, you're Harlan Crow, just because I'm thinking of him right now, and you want to give money to, American Renaissance, which is the white supremacist organization, or they wouldn't call themselves supremacists. They would say they're nationalists and that everybody's equal. We just want our own nation, whatever. Versus, one of the anti-vaxxer organizations, they can they can tell the person at Fidelity that that's where they want the donation to go. Is that correct?
Yeah. And
okay,
although the decision ultimately rests with Fidelity Charitable, they're going to listen. Their policy is to is listen. I mean, look, the business model of these donor advised funds is, give us your money and we'll let you do this. And that's the way to attract clients. So they're they're very cautious about changing those policies. But ultimately, what's happening is that they're being used as pass-through organizations by bad actors to divert funds to bad actors, and it's hurting the public. I mean, misinformation is a massive killer. I think like a year ago, the estimated death toll from anti-vax misinformation was something like 200,000 Americans, maybe more. Like it's a shitload of people. Sorry, it's a ton of people that are.
You can say shitload. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, misinformation has been a real killer throughout this pandemic, and it's very hard to address if it's getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in untraceable cash through these
100%
these funds.
100%. And I also think we need to recognize that misinformation, especially in areas like anti-vaccine, are used as sort of red pilling mechanisms to drive people further rightwards towards fascism. I mean, there's an entire cottage industry that's trying to tie COVID, like the creation of COVID, the way COVID was handled, the whole 9 yards, to like Jewish folks with anti-Semitic literature. Like this has been growing on the right-wing sphere for a while now. So that's just but one example.
It's given the far right an inroad with traditionally liberal enclaves, because anti-vaccine and like wellness has been like a, for many years it was like a liberal thing, and now, with the right, it's now moving into that space, and so you're absolutely right. It's become a tool for radicalization. There's a ton of misinformation that's meant to fuel paranoia, mistrust, and it really does benefit. Like people often ask me, like, well, what did like wealthy folks get out of promoting this? And it's like, well, what they get is people mistrusting their government.
That's right.
And not demanding solutions from their government, but disengaging. Or voting for people who are going to dismantle it. So I think there's a clear, reason why misinformation has become like the sort of bread and butter of the political right.
I think you're right on that. For example, if we have an example where you've got folks thinking like, okay, like the Great Barrington Declaration is what I'm thinking about in particular. But okay, so now you're doing a lockdown, and that's forcing people to not be able to work, and because they can't work, they can't pay their bills. Instead of directing that anger at the powers that be, the wealthy folks that benefit from that, right? They don't want to pay into unemployment insurance.
Well, I got to tell you,
they don't want to pay for a UBI.
I'm currently working on a sort of a podcast to consolidate all of my reporting and present it to people, because I think that I've reported out this story, which is, I think, how money hijacked our COVID response and how the country has suffered for that. But it's not all necessarily in one place, and unless you've read every article I've done, which I'm sure that you have, but I can't say the same for the wonderful people in the chat here. But unless you have that, the full story can kind of get
confusing
and lost. And also you've got a lot of groups with the same people behind them emerging.
And multiple people named Tucker.
One thing that stands out to me is that early on, when you started to see these groups, these right-wing dark money groups come out against COVID mitigations, some of them were also coming out against government intervention. Like, well, government can't sustain people forever. Government shouldn't be aiding people, so that it narrowed the choice, right? Because when the virus hit, the options were do nothing, do something and let people kind of leave people on their own, or government steps in to keep people safe and floats them for the period that is necessary. And that third option was never acceptable to these right-wing groups. And that's why you never saw people from the Great Barrington Declaration talking about the need for more government relief if we are going to do closures.
Yeah.
In fact, Jay Bhattacharya, one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, penned an op-ed called "The Economic Case Against Medicare for All." Like shortly after the pandemic struck. Like, these are not people who believe in government assistance to people. They don't believe in social safety net. They don't believe they don't believe in government. And I think
no, they don't. And yet you had a big chunk of the supposed progressive left who supposedly wants things like Medicare for all getting behind this thing. So
dupes are dupes. Let's be real. Like, I don't, at a certain point, it's willful ignorance. Like, the facts are out there. All the information, the tax filings don't lie. You can see the connections.
No, they don't lie.
These groups.
You can see them.
You can see what they put out. You can see the messaging. You can look these people up. At a certain point, like, if it's like religious dogma kind of, and like
100%, because I had multiple conversations with individuals where I'd say, like, here's the tax filing, and they'd be like, that's been debunked. I'm like, you can't debunk a tax filing.
Right. Like, that is illegal.
Right.
to lie on a tax filing. It is illegal. That is a crime.
What it is. Or the charitable donations, the was the 910s, I forget right now, but all of this, there's a paper trail for. Not all of it, obviously. This dark money we have no paper trail for. We know the money's going to specific organizations. We just don't know who the original source is, I suppose, is a way to think of it.
We can't confirm it. We can look and see, like, if it's a foundation, we can see, like, oh, let's say X foundation gave $390,000 and like 63 cents to Donors Trust. And then you see that same donation amount going to, let's say, Y hate group. And you can kind of piece it together.
Kind of match it up.
So that looks like this group gave to that group. But if it's an individual, you're not going to be able to track it. And so, it's really hard to trace this money. I think something that people need to understand is that the right has a vast web of like nonprofits and political advocacy organizations that often have overlap in personnel and staff. It's not a lot of people, but it's a lot of organizations, and that makes it hard to track the money. It makes it gives it the appearance of larger support, the positions. It gives the appearance that they have more support than they actually do. It's really insidious. They are deliberately doing it this way because it is an AstroTurf effort to manipulate and control public opinion. That's what's happening, and it's happening on a large scale. Yeah,
and it's clearly been somewhat effective because they've managed to sort of tie these like wellness folks on the left with these other guys, right-wing extremists on the right. I cannot tell you how many anti-vaccine rallies I attended where I would see people wearing Bernie Sanders t-shirts, which would be like, and here they are in the middle of these Trump, things. And it's just like wild that this is happening, but it's definitely happening. So I want to go back to your article and talk a little bit about how you garnered this information so people understand it better. So picking up at, despite the lofty promises, however, tax records reveal that Fidelity Charitable has funneled millions of dollars through its donor-advised fund program to groups pushing vaccine misinformation and skepticism. A large portion of the donations we identified came between July 2021 and June 2022, after the first COVID vaccine became available to the public and while the pandemic was ongoing. So, for example, in its 2021 to 2022 fiscal year, it gave roughly $1 million to Children's Health Defense, a nonprofit funded by Robert Kennedy Jr. that sows doubt about vaccine safety, and two of its state's chapters. Kennedy, who long promoted the debunked idea that vaccine can cause autism, which I'm going to stop for a second and just say that this has caused so much damage to the autistic community in so many ways. And I really wish people would think about that for a second. Has called the COVID shots an ethnic bioweapon, quote unquote, and a crime against humanity, quote unquote, which is nuts. Vaccines have indisputably saved lives. We would have polio still around without vaccines. So to do this, call these things a crime against humanity is just gross to me. It's just it goes beyond just being misinformation, right? This is just, conspiracy theory stuff. In a recent post on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, it's sort of like a Prince song. Children's Health Defense claimed the mRNA jabs contaminate breast milk. This is absolutely not true. And you always know misinformation is coming when they call it a jab. Can I be honest here? Like every time I see jab, I'm like, oh, okay. Here.
I'm sorry. I mean, that's my language. Look, it's just at a certain point, it's like shots, vaccines, like vary the language. I know.
It's great language.
I've heard you're not the first person to say like stop calling them jabs. I'm 100% guilty of that.
No, it's fine. It works here because you're talking about COVID misinformation. You know what I mean? That's their language. I think it's fine. I think it's good to use it here actually because that's the language they use. You're speaking their tongue, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So you went through all these tax things, 1 million to Children's Health Defense. So yes, this is probably a drop in the bucket if we looked at the entire sphere of Fidelity donor funds, right? But it's still a large amount of money. That's
a lot of money for Children's Health Defense.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's a tiny drop in the bucket for Fidelity, but it's a lot of money for these groups. Like, and by the way, this information is super easy to find because all you have to do is pull the Schedule I of the IRS Form 990, and that'll tell you all the groups that the donor advised fund is given to. Okay. Same thing if you're looking at any nonprofit. If you pull their Schedule I from their 990, you're going to see all the different groups that they're funding. That's how you have to trace this money. They don't have to report who's funding them publicly. So that's where it gets dark. So that same fiscal year, Fidelity Charitable also gave $235,000 to anti-vaccine activist Del Bigtree's Informed Consent Action Network, nearly twice the amount from the previous fiscal year. So again, in comparison, that's a big donation for them, even though it sounds like small money. The group includes a section, Vaccine Safety Debate, as if there is a debate on its website, implying that the Department of Health and Human Services has not demonstrated the safety of COVID vaccines. Fidelity Charitable is not alone in its anti-public health spending. Throughout the COVID pandemic, big money flowed to groups supposedly promoting public health, but in reality, were peddling anti-vaccine misinformation from some of the largest charities in the country, an analysis by Rolling Stone and Important Context has found. We tracked more than $15 million that donor advised fund sponsors gave in 2020 through 2022 to such groups. The lion's share of the funds were distributed after the vaccines became available. Now, that's interesting information there. Why do you think that is? Well, I think that once the vaccine was a reality, obviously, I think that there's been a lot of mistrust that's been sown about these vaccines. And again, while that might seem counterintuitive, like if we want to get back to normal, like why don't we encourage the vaccine? Right. It's given the right a cudgel against government that it didn't previously have. Like vaccine skepticism is widespread. People point to pharmaceutical companies and drugs in the past that have been shown to be harmful.
Right.
And they say, well, look at that. Therefore, you should be skeptical of this. But like more than a billion doses of this vaccine have been given out, and the data is in. We know that they are safe. We know that they're effective against that they reduce transmission. They greatly reduce severe illness and death and hospitalization. We know that the unvaccinated consistently die at a higher rate from COVID than the vaccinated. And we know that COVID is linked to some serious health complications that the vaccines provide some protection against. Some. Right. Vaccine alone is not enough to end this crisis. I've been saying that forever. The public health experts that I have been, following and talking to have been saying that forever. But like COVID
it mitigates disease. It's not a cure. Let's be clear.
Exactly.
But that's true of any vaccine, right? This is about probabilities in one frame or another. I want to stop for a second and talk about what you're talking about with big pharma here, because I think this is an important part of the conversation. You often see conflations happen within the misinformation anti-vaccine groups, right? And I think it's intentional.
It is intentional. It's 100% intentional.
Right. So yes, is big pharma a problem? Yes, 100% it is. Nobody's saying it isn't. Well, maybe some people are. But having said that, yes, these things are not mutually exclusive. But that doesn't mean that the science isn't sound. When you have multi-different groups of scientists working together in multi-different areas, coming to the same conclusions, peer reviewing each other's work, et cetera, there's ways about this that big pharma can't even try to contaminate, even if they want to. And oftentimes with those medications, what you'll see big pharma doing is locking out scientists from being able to do those exact same things because they don't want it to be, opened up to the rest of the scientific community for them to look at and poke holes at, right? So there are ways you can differentiate between these things, but if you're a member of the public and you don't understand any of this, and you're prone to,
you see like narratives like, oh, they were tested on 8 mice, which is bullshit. But like, oh, it's, we're all guinea pigs. We don't know what's happening. Right. Like these people who are promoting this, a lot of them have an interest in promoting. I mean, a lot of them have a direct financial interest in promoting vaccine skepticism because some of them are, they're hawking they're hawking quack treatments or they're hawking supplements. There's somebody, Dr. Simon Godek on Twitter, who is he's the owner of a vitamin D supplements company, and he's out there saying the vaccines are dangerous and vitamin C and vitamin D is like the way to go. Yeah, dude. I wonder if you have any I wonder if there's any any conflict of interest. It's so out in the open. But look, fundamentally, people are skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry, and I totally get that. I've reported on pharmaceutical lobbying. Throughout this pandemic. I have to say, though, the big issue that they're lobbying on is intellectual property protection.
100%, which should piss everybody off. So taxpayer money funds most of this research. That's just a fact of the matter. Yet they want to hold on to the patents. So they often lobby the government to keep patents on things for longer. And really, that intellectual property belongs to the people in the country. It's taxpayer money that financed it. Why should these corporations be able to reap those benefits when they're not taking on the financial risk? And they often will say, as part of the reason why drugs are so expensive, well, we have to fund the research and development. I'm like, yeah, but a lot of that's being actually funded by taxpayers, so that's not quite right either. So there are valid reasons to get pissed off and angry and upset and have criticism for pharmaceutical companies. But that doesn't mean that vaccines aren't sound science.
Even if Pfizer didn't do the Operation Warp Speed, but it still developed the vaccine. But even if it hadn't, even though it didn't use the taxpayer money, the technology was created with it stood on the shoulders of publicly funded research.
That's right. Yeah. And also mRNA tech stuff was mainly funded by tax. Yeah.
It's worse in a pandemic because the interest in a public health crisis, the collective interest outweighs the profit interest of a private company.
I agree.
Period. It has to when it comes to something like necessary life-saving medicine. We have seen a push at the world stage at the World Health Organization and at the World Bank. We've seen two pushes to eliminate or waive IP protections for necessary COVID treatments. Pharmaceutical companies have been lobbying hard in the US to protect their intellectual property. And the result is that poor countries have less access to the vaccine than wealthy countries, particularly in the global south. And that perpetuates the pandemic. It allows new variants to form. It ensures that it continues. And it's not just the vaccines. Pfizer is trying to protect Paxlovid. It's prescription COVID treatments, oral antiviral, which is effective at reducing the severe COVID and potentially long COVID. So that's the big scandal with the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, I agree.
They're profiteering off of a once in a century pandemic at the expense of poor countries and poor people. So, that when people say oh, you can't trust, pharma, I hear you, but insulin.
But you can trust most scientists.
Just because it's manufactured by pharmaceutical companies doesn't mean you shouldn't take it. Right.
Insulin is definitely helping. I mean, if you by that means don't take any pain medication like Advil either, because
it's silly, but again, there has been a serious loss of faith in government since the 1950s. Really, I mean, You had the 1950s, I think, was a period where people trusted their government. But then you had assassinations. You had JFK assassinated. You had the Vietnam War. Then you had Watergate. Then you had stagflation. And then, Reagan gets elected saying, like, government is the
Pentagon
problem.
Papers. I'd say Pentagon Papers.
A whole bunch of things that sort of shattered the glass. And people lost faith.
Right.
And so in the 1990s, X-Files, one of my favorite shows, is like a phenomenon. And the whole point of that show is don't trust the government. The government is you can't trust anything from the government. So like
you can't. You gotta love that it's FBI agents that are like
yeah. So like, but the lack of faith is so baked in at this point, and really it has been like a boon to neoliberalism. Like
100%. It's just made it go faster, right? The privatization, all of the bad ill effects that cause the public mistrust have only accelerated. You're correct. I agree.
The neoliberals want you to not trust government or 100%. View it as a solution to your problems. Right. They want you to view government as the problem. As Reagan said, government is the problem. Right. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. COVID showed us that it's actually, I'm from the government and you're on your own.
I agree. Like, I think it's unfortunate. And people need to realize that most of these institutions require public trust in order to function properly. The minute that public trust is gone, you end up with what we're seeing now, more radicalization across the board. People are angry for a reason. They don't know where to take that anger. And so it's taken on all kinds of forms that are bad for our democracy. And what's left of our democracy, when really we should all be trying to make our democracy more robust. Also, let me mention this. If anybody has any questions for Walker, feel free to drop a question or comment into the super chat. We'd love to have your super chats and your comments. And also, if you haven't yet, please like and share the live stream so more people get to see it, and become a Status Coup member. I have to remember to do this stuff. I always forget, Walker.
That's fine. I think that it's important for people to have the important context for what's going on.
I see what you did there.
You have to look and see sort of why we are the way we are, or like what the fuck is happening. And when I look at this, I see people very well off, ultra wealthy conservatives with an interest in keeping government small and ineffectual,
and caps, libertarians, extreme libertarians.
Promoting, skepticism toward public health measures. Oh, it's encroaching tyranny.
Right.
I have news for you. If the government implemented clean air standards in every workplace, you wouldn't notice, and you would get sick less often, and it wouldn't cost you fucking anything. It might cost your employer, a couple, a few $100 to install HEPA filtration or something. But it's not encroaching tyranny. It's just basic worker protection. That's what we're aiming for here, is basic worker protection.
This is in 1776, and you're not fighting the King of England.
Yeah, it's wild though, because like a lot of these people are coming together from all sorts of different backgrounds. You've got like wealthy capitalists who want to see who want government to leave their businesses alone. You've got like creationists who want the government to stay out of their classrooms. I don't know. We're a little off track here. We're talking.
No, I hear you, but all of that is true. It's all intertwined together. And really at the end of the day, it's the victims are the folks that get sucked into this stuff. Because it is effective, it can be effective, and it's not helping their cause, right? So then you see people that are in unions voting for people that are like, yeah, right to work, good idea, fuck the unions. And then you're like, wait, what? Why would you vote for that guy? He wants to do the opposite of what you are and get rid of your union. It doesn't make sense, but this is the stuff that happens, right? Dave L. Oh, sorry, I want to put this up. Dave L's super chat. This is a good point. Dave L, thank you for the $5. We appreciate it. Hofstadter wrote The Paranoid Style in American Politics back in 1964. Yeah. It was like he saw the future with Alex Jones.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Look, there are two competing narratives, and one of them is accurate and the other one is just bonkers. And the first one is government either created this crisis or used it to glom more control, more social control for some nefarious end, unclear. Often, maybe depopulation is one of the theories. On the other, the accurate version of what happened, a once-in-a-century pandemic hits, a chronically underfunded government that's been hollowed out by decades of neoliberal governance is caught flat-footed, unprepared. People are freaked out, and in a hasty response, you see a historic, albeit temporary, expansion of the safety net with stimulus checks, pandemic unemployment assistance, the eviction moratorium. And suddenly people have a little bit more breathing room than they've had in years. And so they start leaving their shitty low wage jobs and saying, actually, I want to form a union. And so now businesses are dealing with loss of workers and unionization pushes, and so it's freaking out the wealthy, conservatives who have been trying to destroy all of this stuff for a century now. And so what they do is they mobilize to turn people against government and get them to think the crisis is over. But economic appeals like, oh shit, we're going to lose a lot of money if this continues and this paradigm shift happens, aren't going to sell it. So they turn to science misinformation to say it's not a crisis.
They attack,
and by the way, they're trying to take your freedom. Which of those narratives makes more sense? Think about it for like 3 minutes.
Think about it. Yes, please think about it. They're not, nobody's trying to take away your freedom. That's not the point. It's a public health crisis. We're trying to protect people. Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to say this. It's not 1776. You're not fighting the King of England. Please get that.
I see one
and
comment.
Walker, go ahead.
That I want to address that, this idea that corporations really were orchestrating this, that there was corporations were like, we want lockdowns. No, they didn't. COVID mitigation measures crippled huge sectors of the economy, not just the mitigation measures, the virus itself as well. And you have groups like the Heritage Foundation saying COVID mitigations are costly and they're hurting us, and we have to reopen and get everything back to normal. The opposite is true. They were not pushing for a lockdown, and in fact, the bigger problem also is they didn't want to pay for unemployment insurance because that would cost the money. They most certainly didn't want to fund anything like a UBI or universal basic income, which is what you would see in Europe. No, they wanted everybody back to work and working for low wages. The extra unemployment that folks did get during that period, I think, was a game changer. Also, let me say this. It was a game changer because for once, these are individuals that are now making much more decent wages than what they did in their minimum wage jobs. And all of a sudden they're like, man, I have dignity in my life now. I want dignity. Why can't I have a job in which I'm paid enough to get by on and have some dignity? And you know what? You should have that, but corporations don't want to do that. We have, for example, gas was like almost $8 a gallon $8 a gallon in Los Angeles last week. Walker, our minimum wage in the city of LA is $15 an hour. Can we have that conversation? Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. Like, look, Heritage on March 27th, 2020, put out a commentary on its website that said that the UN was predicting, quote, a global decline in direct investment from 30 to 40% during 2020 to 2021.
Okay.
While earlier concerns had focused on disruptions of supply chains linked to China, current fears are much more strongly connected to the downturn in global demand due to quarantines, lockdowns, business closures, and employment furloughs.
Right.
The business community, corporations were worried sick about COVID mitigations. The business community wanted the country open and back to normal because the longer the crisis wears on, the more people are likely to turn to their government and say, we need solutions.
Right.
The more likely they are to unionize and say, I need more if I'm going to keep risking my health to come into work.
Right.
Like, this is not hard. There is a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of people who are dedicated to lying to you, to telling you that this was, using the language of populism to sell an agenda that is really what big business was promoting. It is a tried and true tactic. It's been going on for decades, but you shouldn't fall for it.
Oh, I agree. I think like a prime example of that were these memes that were going around saying Jeff Bezos made this much an hour of this, whatever, during the pandemic. All of this is true, right? But
businesses with online marketplaces did well.
Right.
But that's about it.
That's about it. So this is like a cherry picking one example of a guy who had his business increase but the vast majority of businesses, opposite is true. So, but again, that's how you frame your argument to sell, your, I was about to say Hospira propaganda, because that's how you get your point across. What else would you want to, I want to move on to the climate change, because this was something I wanted to talk about last month, but you were getting married, you lucky guy. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So I still do want to talk about this, but what have we missed in this Rolling Stone piece that you think is important? So
basically, these donor advised funds are unlikely to change their policies, barring major public backlash. The bigger problem is obviously that the IRS is giving tax exempt status to groups that shouldn't have it. That's really it. But it's wild that this is happening. These funds are a way for bad actors to conceal their political influence peddling. Something should change. There should be, reform here.
There should be reform. Let me ask you this, just because it's on topic and it's something I struggle with all the time. What do we do about growing misinformation in our political sphere? And
oh God.
all right, that's a whole nother show, I suppose. But honestly, how are people supposed to just on their day-to-day try to figure out whether something is trustworthy or not? Like that's a whole struggle. What I'm getting at is not necessarily people's fault that they're spoon-fed a lot of misinformation, because who do you trust and how do you know when that's happening? And I don't think we should do anything to infringe on First Amendment. What do we do about this?
But look, the First Amendment is an absolute, and there's been a real push to kind of weaponize the First Amendment.
Yes, I agree.
To have judges come down and say, well, actually, it is pretty absolute, and you can't do anything. In a crisis, in a public health crisis like COVID, when it is especially early in the crisis, when it's essential for government to get its messaging out there and whatever. I don't believe that you have an unlimited right to say whatever the fuck you're going to say, especially if you're hurting people.
Okay.
But in terms of like, how do you address misinformation long term? I don't know. I'm a journalist. I'm doing what I think I can do.
Right.
To expose
I feel you.
It.
It's a sticky, tough thing. And I talk to my compatriots that are in Europe, and they don't have First Amendment protections there. So the bad side of that is journalists can get prosecuted or get sued for defamation, even if they're reporting factual truth, because somebody decides they don't like something, like a rich guy. We've seen that happen. But on the flip side, they often do have less misinformation. I don't know. That's a longer conversational
table. It's very
table.
difficult. It's very difficult. But I think one thing that we could do to solve this problem is crack down on these nonprofits that are acting as hubs for misinformation. Strip them of their tax exempt status. You shouldn't be if you're not really a charity, then you shouldn't be tax exempt, because we are footing the bill for that.
We are footing the bill
for all of these the hate groups, for these anti-vax groups, and we shouldn't have to. I think exposing where these groups get their money is important.
Huge.
doing.
This
the
is
best
a First
they can
Amendment
arm
solution
people
to a First Amendment problem in many
information.
ways, which I think is a good way to approach it. Before we move on to the climate change thing, actually, I want to put up this graphic from you and Alex did another piece about donations similar to this piece in Rolling Stone, but top donors to hate groups. So these are the same types of investment vehicles.
I was not involved in that story, except
is this all Alex?
It was Alex, and encouraging him to get it done. That was my big role. Was like, you got to move on this. Come on, faster. Work faster.
Colin, can we put this up as top donors to hate groups? So basically, Alex went through and he pulled the same sort of information you did with this anti-vaccine donations, but to hate groups. I think the top one was American Renaissance, actually, and a few others, but you'll see there. Yeah, thanks. That's perfect. Top donors to hate groups. Since 2014, these donor-advised fund sponsors and community foundations have given millions to organizations designated as hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center. This is crazy when you look at it. All right. So National Christian Charitable Foundation, 132,000. Fidelity Charitable, 25,000. Schwab Charitable, 11,975. Donors Trust, 7 million. I'm sorry, million. Have I been saying million?
Yeah.
I'm having a brain fry. 7,900,000. Vanguard Charitable, 7,207,000. Foundation for the Carolinas, that's a new name for me, 5,457,000. Christian Community Foundation, DBA Waterstone, that's a big one, 5 million. American Endowment Foundation, 2,375,000. National Philanthropic Trust, 1,500,000, and California Community Foundation, 1,490,000. So, I mean, that is a lot of money going from
all tax exempt. And by the way,
donate to your favorite hate group and get a tax donation. This is disgusting. It's insane. I can't even wrap my head around it, honestly.
Yep. You should not. We really need to crack down on the IRS needs enforcement power. Really, it needs to. Yeah. We need to adequately fund the IRS and empower it to enforce, its rules against these
I agree.
groups. I mean, like that's one thing we can do. Right. The long-term solution here, I think, is overturning Buckley.
Valeo. Yeah, that was the start. That was the pre-Citizens United ruling that led to Citizens United. For folks that don't know, I believe 1972. Am I
76?
76. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you there. That opened the door for all of this much earlier than Citizens United did. It gets very little attention, but I think it was more catastrophic in many ways.
The money is speech, or spending is a form of speech. That's right. That's Buckley. So right. I mean, that finding an alternative standard, one that allows us to sort of rein in the insane amounts of political spending in this country. Right. I think that would be good as well.
I agree. Money in politics is the root of all evil. I don't know who said that, but it's true. All right. COVID denial's second act, climate change denial. Is that where we're headed? I think Walker might have a point with this. So with the pandemic emergency declared officially over, even though it's not, public health opponents have found a new target for their conspiracy theories. So climate change, it's a new target for this group. Obviously, this is an old thing that's been going on with the right for forever, right? Climate change is a hoax. Climate change science isn't real. It's not due to man-made stuff. It's just doing it on its own. It goes in cycles. I mean, there's been so many renditions of the far right trying to get out of climate change. Most of that funded by fossil fuel money. But again, it's the same playbook, isn't it? Fossil fuel money comes in. We want to protect our industry. Let's feed some misinformation, tell people they're losing their freedom, get them pissed off, and boom, here we go, right?
It's exactly the same playbook. Look, for climate denial, the fossil fuel industry and its allies elevated, scientists who weren't necessarily climate scientists, but they had credentials. They had letters next to their name, and that was what was important. And they amplified the shit out of them to make it seem as though there was a real public debate over whatever. And with COVID denial, and that's a very large umbrella, I acknowledge, we saw the same thing. Groups that opposed public health measures, amplifying a group of scientists. In fact, you can pretty much name them. Everybody, I think, who's been following this is familiar with like Tracy Beth Hoeg, Jay Bhattacharya, Martin Kulldorff, Vinay Prasad, these folks, elevating them, amplifying them, booking them on right-wing news,
right,
or at conferences to speak to right-wing groups, or
And if you're on the left and you're not getting sucked into this, they turn around and call you a shit lib, which is like, really?
Yeah. And so what these organizations, what these, capital business aligned right-wing organizations have done is they've amplified these individuals to create the appearance of real debate. The Great Barrington Declaration, I think, was meant to give the appearance that there was a major scientific dispute over public health measures.
When there wasn't. Yeah.
There wasn't. Major public health organizations the world over supported, like, we know how to handle pandemics. This is what we got to do. So it's the same playbook. And so it's not surprising to see that as the pandemic sort of recedes from public consciousness, these individuals like Jeffrey Tucker, the founder of the Brownstone Institute, one of the organizers of the Great Barrington Declaration, sort of may start dabbling in a little bit of climate change denial and warning, the climate lockdowns are coming. The climate lockdowns are coming. Like it's
I laugh, but it's not funny because the climate lockdowns very well may be coming because we might be facing catastrophic death of our planet. So, I mean, it's not funny, but the fact that these guys can't even have a reasonable conversation about that fact of the matter is just really frightful to me.
They don't believe in government. They only care about the private sector. They don't care about workers. They're going to do
that all the way to their Mad Max apocalypse. And you're going to be like, you're killing yourself too, guy. What are you thinking here?
It's ideological. It's also the fact that Jeffrey Tucker has spent a career, has built his career in the world of right-wing dark money. Like there's a lot of money. There is a lot of money on the right.
A lot of money. There's way more money on the right than there is on the left.
And there isn't an equivalent, like the networks of organizations that they have promoting their messaging. Nothing comparable exists on the left. You don't have that.
Nothing. You don't have that.
This is like weapons grade propaganda network that is unleashed on the American people. Like.
Right. No, it's
incredibly
vicious.
Dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous and vicious. And a lot of that dark money goes into like playing with algorithms, promoting certain right-wing extreme content over, more reasonable stuff. Like, I mean, it's a whole thing. Anyway, that's also, we can table that for another day because that's a whole nother show. I want to go to this climate change article that you have because this was right when the wildfires were really causing massive, terrible, bad air all over the northeastern part of the country, right? When smoke from Canadian wildfires turned skies a hazy orange along the U.S. eastern seaboard in June, America's right-wing talking heads got to work not only downplaying the health risks posed by the smog, but denying that the hazardous conditions had anything to do with human-driven climate change. Among them was Jeffrey Tucker, our friend at the Brownstone Institute, who posted a fake dialogue on Twitter, now X, the site formerly known as Twitter, hinting that the crisis was merely a tool for social control. Next, it will be climate change. You watch, Tucker tweeted. Now that's ridiculous. 6 months later, mask up, stay at home, and cancel everything, including Broadway shows and outdoor sports due to wildfire smoke overtaking the United States. Why is this happening? Climate change. Well, yeah, that is why it's happening. And yeah, it's a problem. And yes, all that smoke can make people really sick.
Yep. Well, here's the thing about Tucker. He is a longtime supporter of the tobacco industry. In fact,
I didn't know that. There you go.
Oh, well, in leaked emails that.
Oh, that's right. I did know. I forgot about
leaked
this.
Emails that I obtained. He's talking about how he's like the left constantly says that I'm a child labor advocate and that I support kids cigarette smoking.
Right.
And like it's kind of true. It's like, well, it is kind of true. Like, I would repeal the child labor prohibition. And I also, when my son was in high school, to keep him off weed, I bought him cigarettes, and then he started selling those to the school. And so everybody was smoking, and like, yeah, that's kind of a problem, but at least he paid off the witnesses with cigarettes, so I didn't get in trouble. Like, that is almost, I mean, it's definitely not verbatim, but it is exactly the story that he recounts to his pals at the Brownstone Institute and leaked emails. That's an important context as well. You can go and see it. I have the email screenshots there. You can see all of this. It's just, and so of course he's saying, wildfire smoke, don't worry about it. Like, smoking has never been something he's been super concerned with.
Right. All right.
He posted a picture of child laborers with Newsies with cigars in their mouths, saying like, don't these kids look happier than kids today? Like, this is what we're dealing with. Okay, this is the other side. And if you think for a second that this guy is an ally in any way to your pro labor, left wing, whatever, I assure you
that's not true.
He is not.
That is some scary stuff. Let me go back to this real quick. I know we've got maybe 15 more minutes and you got to get going. So hang on. That's the old article. Let me find it. COVID. Hold on. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, there it is. I have all these tabs open still. All right, so talking about the same Tucker. In July, for example, Tucker published a commentary in the Epoch Times. This is the right-wing conspiracy newspaper affiliated with the Chinese Falun Gong movement, titled Climate Change is the New COVID. In it, Tucker asserted that the whole of mainstream press had shifted completely to climate change panic from COVID-19 panic. And I quote, everything qualifies as evidence of a new crisis, smoke in the air, rain on the ground, sun in the sky, sand in the wind, you name it, Tucker wrote. They're trying to paint a picture of an earth and atmosphere that are crumbling because of our way of life. It's all happening right on schedule. So, I mean, again, that's exactly what is happening, bro. Our way of life is absolutely crumbling. That's not up for debate. I can't believe we're still having a debate about climate change in this day and age. But
well, that's the thing. We're not. Scientists are not debating it. The debate isn't real. The debate is these corporate aligned, these corporate shills, corporate flacks on the right who don't care about anything but whether or not money is being made. If money, their attitude is, if money can be made and is being made, that's good. And anything that gets in the way of that is bad. It doesn't matter how the money is being made. If nailing thumbtacks into babies was a lucrative industry, there would be a lobbyist for it, talking about how attempts to get rid of it were assaults on liberty. Like, this is how cynical these people are. They are completely just bought and sold at their core. There is nothing.
They don't care about the future. They must not. I mean, if 100 years everybody has to live underground because we've destroyed the planet, they don't care that could be the future. Like, they have no feeling or empathy or just normal human stuff, I guess.
It's a combination of I think it's a combination of ideology, privilege, and money.
And money.
There's a lot of money in this world.
All right. I want to turn now just real quickly. Obviously, we have breaking news going on in the Israeli-Gaza conflict. I will not call this a war. I don't think it should be called a war. These are not two separate sovereign nations attacking each other. That's not what's happening here. I think a lot of our mainstream media paints it that way, but this is absolutely not the case. The Palestinians are an occupied people. So that's a different context to me. But obviously, Israel's now expanding their ground invasion into Gaza in an effort to get Hamas. At this point, they're just bombing civilians. I don't think that's a crazy thing. We're almost, 6,700 death toll in Palestine, even though Biden thinks that we should doubt this number. Sorry, Biden. If anything, that number could be undercounted as far as I'm concerned. That's just ridiculous that you believe that. But they're not killing Hamas. They're killing innocent people. So that also is not really accurate. I feel
this
it's really
is
difficult.
a complete quagmire.
It's a quagmire.
Going into Gaza, there's no. I mean, this will end. It won't end. It'll just be a cycle of violence.
Right.
Civilians are going to get caught up in it, mostly on the Palestinian side.
Right.
And
also on the Israeli side, but mostly on the
Israeli
Palestinian
side as well.
right.
And hell, the U.S. for supporting it may feel the blowback, down the line. Like there's.
I agree with you there. 100%. Whether that's coming from Iran or Lebanon or someplace else, 100%.
Look, who knows when the next Osama bin Laden is going to be minted? That's.
Yeah, none of this is a solution. And in fact, Walker, you'll appreciate this. Last week, my entire show was on this conflict, and it was the perfect right-wing insanity conversation because the government, Israel, is very much right-wing fascist at this point. I don't think there's the one lefty that they have in the Knesset was suspended by the rest of the government for speaking out. So, I mean, this has all the earmarks of fascism, and obviously Hamas is a militant group. They're not lefties either. So it's like the perfect right-wing insanity mess. So currently what's happening is a UN resolution for a ceasefire actually did pass. This is I believe, the third go at it. The first two did not pass. Obviously, both Israel and the United States did not vote yes on the ceasefire. Thank you for pulling that up. They want to stop that. And then they also condemned the rest of the UN for not saying something about Hamas as if that was necessary. Of course, I mean, you can say that this is a problem in escalation in this conflict. You can say that the Palestinians have a legitimate beef and this occupation needs to end. You can address all of these things without defending Hamas.
Absolutely. Look,
I think Israel wants to use it.
And they took civilian hostages. Okay.
Right.
That's
fucked up.
Yeah, there's no excuse for that. You don't target civilians. But on the other side of this, I shouldn't say but because somebody will clip it like, but nothing that comes before the word but counts. No. Right. On the other side of this is that the power dynamic is important to acknowledge, especially as we talk about de-escalation, because this is not a conflict between two opposing armies. It is a conflict between a terror group and a mechanized modern military power with the full backing of the United States.
That is also their occupier. I mean,
that. Yeah. And is an occupying force. This is the dynamic, and it has to be addressed. If you're going to de-escalate the conflict, you have to talk about it in those terms. You have to acknowledge that.
I agree. It's crazy that we can't have that conversation, though. It's like, Israel has effectively been able to tie any criticism of their government to anti-Semitism, which is, I think, really problematic for a whole host of reasons. Obviously no government is Teflon coated from criticism. That's ridiculous. That almost enables bad behavior to keep happening, right? If somebody's it's like giving your drunk uncle, that I was saying last week, it's like giving your drunk uncle the keys to the car and telling him to drive nuts all over the place and doing nothing to stop him, right? I mean,
yeah, it's ridiculous. Look,
it's ridiculous.
I'm Jewish. I'm a secular
we
Jew.
all are.
I'm Jewish, and I don't buy that.
I don't either.
I find it really baffling that that Americans have such a hard time talking about this and putting humanity first. It's either it's all this or all that.
Right. Well, you know what? Our government wants, like you said at the beginning of the show, and I think this is why the media propaganda surrounding this is so effective and continues to go the way it does. The United States desperately needs to have a base there in the Middle East that's a friendly base for them. This is entirely geopolitical. It has nothing to do with the Jewish people or the Muslim people or the Christian Palestinians. This is geopolitical for the United States of America. Yes, they hide that and they drape it in language of trying to say we're protecting Jewish people. It's bullshit. I
will say, I think that, Biden is getting a lot of criticism for this, and rightly so. But I think that Trump also deserves a significant amount of criticism because he destabilized when you moved the embassy to Jerusalem and that. Yep. That was a big green light. We're not, the U.S. is we're not going to do anything. And then Israel has so much support in our government that nobody was going to
nobody's going to stop it. Yeah,
no one's going to stop.
The Democrats are willing to support fascists in Israel that they would never support in this country. It's wild to me because some of these folks we're talking about are 100% like hard right fascists, like way to the right of Trump. That's just not a debatable thing I'm saying right now. It's absolutely the case.
Netanyahu has got to go. He's
awful.
He's awful. He's a war criminal. I mean, this guy is awful. And like, I don't know. I don't know. It's a conflict that like, it doesn't have an easy solution. I think the most immediate thing that needs to happen is we need a ceasefire.
And the United States should be arguing for that, not trying to do the opposite. I want to ask you, Walker, before I want to talk about the fact that they've now turned off the communications ability to Gaza, so people cannot connect with each other in the outside world. Like Gaza has been left in the dark with no connection to the outside world.
Utterly horrifying. Like
it's horrifying to me. Yeah, if you get bombed, you cannot. How are you supposed to get an ambulance? Even though that's probably close to impossible at this point. The fact that Israel has the ability to even shut off their electricity and power at will is insane to me. Obviously, that speaks more to the fact there's a blockade and there's still an occupying force there. So that is that goes to the power dynamic that you're talking about. But let me ask you this. Right-wing insanity isn't just for Republicans. I'm going to say that right now again, because here you have Biden going on television this week arguing that we should be giving $100 billion to support war in both Israel and in Ukraine. $100 billion. That is an insane amount of money. Yet you ask him about Medicare for all, for example, and he says we can't afford it.
Sure. I do want to push back though on the idea that foreign aid is something that like is inherently at odds with that. If we can't do both. The U.S. has enough money to provide foreign aid. Now, where that foreign aid goes is absolutely a conversation that should be had. I don't think we should be supporting Israel while it's carrying out war crimes and killing tons of civilians.
Yeah, because a lot of that foreign aid is being used to buy bombs. It's not for use but doing hospitals and supplying food or whatever. Yeah. So I get what you're saying.
For all, we could afford that, and we could be the most generous nation on earth. Like we have the ability to do it.
Oh, I agree with you there. It's not a tit for tat, but it's amazing to me that when they want, I guess what I'm getting at is not trying to do a whataboutism here. What I'm suggesting is when they want to do something, all of a sudden the money is fine.
Sure. Absolutely. Look, it's just a really horrifying situation that we're witnessing. It's going to be a quagmire. It's going to be a disaster that drags on and on and on, unless and frankly it's gonna hurt Biden politically, because
I agree.
If he can't get this shit under control, which it doesn't,
he's lost the election. I think he might have already, but
that might be it, which would be really awful because
his language has also been very dehumanizing, I think, and that's gonna Walker, what do you think about this? My issue a lot of times with the Democrats, even if it's a Democrat that a lot of the left doesn't support, they might be willing to go to the polls and vote for that guy because the other guy is worse, even though that's a ridiculous lesser evil argument. I get all that. I'm putting that aside for now. But
let me just say, I have been critical of those lesser evil arguments for many years, but I don't think I wouldn't call it ridiculous, because Trump absolutely did significant damage just by his judicial appointments alone.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
We damage that we might, there are cases before the Supreme Court right now that might overturn the Chevron doctrine, crippling our administrative state, our ability of government to function. This is no joke. The rights takeover of the judiciary is one of the most serious problems we face. And because we have a divided Congress, and because we have a weak Democratic Party that doesn't like to wield power even when it has it, the court has become just outsized in its strength. The judiciary has become way stronger than I think it was ever intended. It's
not being checked. I think you're right. Yeah. Okay, good point. Also, I love that this is coming from a guy with a law degree. Let me point that out. But I guess what I'm getting at is, do you worry, Walker, that when stuff like this happens and Biden comes out with this dehumanizing rhetoric that's really offensive to a lot of the left, they'll no longer vote for the guy. They get so deflated that they stay home and they don't vote. Oftentimes the biggest chunk of voters are the non-voters, and that actually can sway an election.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you don't, that there isn't enough, that the left doesn't really have the power right now to take the election from Biden, but it could definitely cost him the election. And that's, I mean,
that's it. That's what I'm getting at.
This is something that Will Stancil said on whatever platform now that we're all on, Threads.
I'm not on
Blue
there,
Sky?
but okay.
You should get on
Blue
Threads.
Sky. Oh, I'm on Blue Sky. Well, I will not tell
Threads has some cool features. I don't like Zuckerberg, but it's got some cool features. That
my issue is that EU privacy laws. Did it finally come into compliance with EU?
Oh, I am focused.
Okay, so that until they do that, I'm not.
Just give me the gifts or whatever. No. No, look, it's we kind of, as journalists, we have to kind of.
No, I feel you. I got you.
Where the people are going, and it seems like Threads is the next.
All right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'll consider this now. I haven't got on there yet, but I do have my Instagram.
I like Blue Sky. Feels like a retreat, though. It's like
it is a retreat. But it's not
Blue
public.
Sky is like everybody's nice.
Right.
There's a lot of lefties. It feels like home. Threads is
also. Let me say this, Status Coup viewers, if you need a Blue Sky invite code to get on the platform, you really want to be on there, and you haven't been able to get one, go ahead and email Status Coup. I have a few of them I can give out. So the first 10 people that email Status Coup for code, you're hearing me now, write it down. The emails, Colin, what's the email info at? There it is. info@statuscoup.com.
Somebody says, no Threads for us in the EU. Good riddance. Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough. I would prefer it if look, I have more followers on Blue Sky than I do on Threads. I find Blue Sky's engage, whatever they're doing for
I like
algorithm, I think works a lot better.
I agree.
I like Blue Sky a lot.
All right, so I want to turn because I know you got to go soon. I want to turn just really quickly. Gaza. This is the latest breaking news. Gaza is approaching a near total internet blackout. This is from CNN. They have been updating their page all day about what's going on there. Gaza is approaching a near total internet blackout as the region suffered its worst loss in connectivity today since fighting first broke out on October 7th. Internet service in Gaza is approaching a near total blackout. Gaza's internet connectivity on October 27th, you can see the graph there, fell to its lowest level since the Hamas attack amid heavy Israeli ground strikes, according to network analysis by internet watchdog NetBlock. So we're not going to be getting any news out of there anytime soon. What little we have been getting. The last standing major internet operator in the region, Paltel, experienced damage to its international routes, according to NetBlock's and an internet outage monitoring firm based in London. Many Palestinians are experiencing a total loss of internet access and the ability to communicate electronically, according to the data, while some may have very little connectivity. So, I mean, can be very devastating in an already, region where it's hard to get by. I mean, the aid trucks were blocked for a long time. Then it was 22 trucks, which is not going to be enough. There's no fuel. I believe the IDF is saying they won't give any fuel replacement because they say Hamas is hoarding it. I mean, that might be true. That might not be true. It's hard to say. But, the other part of the conversation is there's still hostages that Hamas is holding on to. And some of those hostages have been killed by these airstrikes. Why isn't and given that as well, why isn't Israel doing more to negotiate with them to get the hostages back as opposed to doing what they're doing now? I mean, this is insane to me.
I just don't think Israel gives a shit about the civilians in Gaza. I think at this point, this is retribution. It's not anything more than that.
Yeah. Iraq. Let's talk about Iraq for 2 seconds.
Or Afghanistan or any of it.
Yeah, I mean, what happens? Iran, I think it was not Iraq, not to confuse these two conversations, but Iran had said last week that if there was a ground invasion, they would consider going to war. I mean, is that just bombastic rhetoric, or do you think there's teeth to that?
I wouldn't speculate, but I think that the temperature desperately needs to be turned down.
I agree.
Because this is like, it's a quagmire. It's an obvious, this is an obvious trap. What is happening now is obviously a trap. And everybody just seems to be well, there's nothing we can do. We're going to step in it. It's like the rake on the ground. You've got a rake on the ground and it's well, I guess I have no choice but to jump on it.
It's bad. All right. So Iraq has now said they're urging mosques to show solidarity with Gaza today. This was 22 minutes ago. And then also UN aid agencies say they've lost contact with their staff in Gaza. So these are UNA, United Nations aid agencies, can no longer get in touch with their staff. So things have become drastically dire. I do also want to point out that the Rafah crossing, this is the crossing that connects Egypt into the Gaza Strip, that's been closed. You had a bunch of people, including U.S. citizens, had gone down close to the Rafah crossing. They've been there waiting to try to cross to get out, have not been able to do that.
It's fucking horrific. It's horrific. Like, look, we shouldn't be supporting this in any way.
I agree.
The only role the U.S. should be playing here is saying we are not going is forcing Israel to de-escalate. Look, you're a military power. The cards are largely in your hands.
Right.
You could de-escalate. You have the ability to do that.
I agree.
But you have a government in Israel that has no interest in that.
They have no interest, and they've learned nothing from our experiences in Iraq. I think the Iraq War is a prime example of how
expelled. Israel needs new leadership, and the only bright, ray of hope here is that Netanyahu's approval rating is tanking because of this. So hopefully, we see a change. There are good people in Israel who can,
Oh, there's lots of leftist organizers that have been fighting for Palestinian rights for a long time. They're being squashed out.
Peace, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree. No, again, no group is monolithic. And I think part of the problem is that it's the United States just carte blanche supporting the fascism in Israel because it benefits them geopolitically. If they wanted to have a very real conversation about, a nuanced conversation about how there are people in power that are very horrifyingly terrible people, that's just not up for debate. And maybe we should support, folks in Israel that do have this better interest in mind, because they do exist. But, the Knesset guy that got suspended is a prime example of that. He spoke out against what the government was doing, and they suspended him. Like, it was fast and quick and boom. Is that democracy? Come on, man. That's as bad as what's happening in Tennessee. None of the Democrats in the United States were okay with what happened in Tennessee, but they're not going to care about that. I guess I don't understand why they're fine with what's happening in Israel and accepting things that are happening in Israel that they would never accept here in the United States. That's my question, because it's part of what the problem is, right? If Israel had decided many years ago that the Palestinians also deserve to have their own country, let's be honest, all of that land was taken from them. The people that now reside in the Gaza Strip were moved out of their villages into that location. They gave up their homes, their land, everything for this. And that's never been dealt with. And until that is dealt with in some kind of a way that makes sense, there's just going to be more terrorism. How do they not see this? This is not security for anybody.
It's very difficult to envision a long-term solution at the moment, given everything.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there.
Fundamentally, like, Israel can be a democracy where Palestinians are treated as full citizens,
right?
Or it can be a religious state.
I agree. You can't be both.
That's and fundamentally, I think that is the big issue that underlies all of this. Yeah. And you do have these far right elements in Israel controlling Israel's government right now that are not helping.
No, they're not helping.
You're not working toward a solution. Like, look, as a Jewish person, I have very mixed feelings about Israel.
Which is, of course you do. Like, who doesn't?
How can you not?
How can you not?
People, I'm sort of irked by the question, by when people say, well, Israel has a right to exist.
Oh God, I hate that.
It's such a stupid statement. Israel's right to exist is the fact that it does exist and it's not going anywhere.
Right. Okay. Exactly.
So acknowledging that, how are you going to
It solves, yeah. It's
how
just
are we going to move toward a reality where the Palestinian people are not an oppressed, people? Right. That's we have a right to exist. Well, so do the Palestinian people.
That's right. You cannot provide a solution to what happened in the Holocaust by displacing all the Palestinians. This is not a solution. It's just not. It never will be.
And look, you can't. Oppression will always breed violence.
That's right.
That doesn't mean the violence is justified or righteous.
It's understandable. It doesn't make it righteous, but it is understandable.
It's an explanation, not an excuse, right? Like,
boom. Yes.
Like and that violence in turn breeds more violence. Like it's a cycle. It's a fucking cycle. And at some point, somebody's got to take a step back and say, "I'm not doing this anymore. We're not doing this anymore.
Agree.
Can we talk instead?"
Right.
And like, it's very difficult right now with everything that's going on. And nobody wants to say that in the wake of a terror attack. Nobody wants to be the one to say, let's take a breather. Like maybe let's not go and make heads roll. But like we've seen what that kind of like chest pounding does. We've seen where it leads. Right. We're still fucking dealing with that.
Yeah.
Today, we're still dealing with the consequences because we had some brash idiot from Texas who said we're gonna show you how we do things, down here, over there, and we're still over there.
Right. Right. I mean, the lessons from Iraq should be deep and clear as to how this is. Plays out. I agree.
Eliminate Al Qaeda. We didn't.
No, we didn't. You cannot eliminate terrorism by creating more angry people. We created more terrorism, and I just don't understand how folks don't seem to understand that. The only real solution here is ending the occupation, but the right wing refuses to do that. And let me say this: is motivated by fear. I understand the fear. I get it. It's motivated by the increase in anti-Semitism. I totally get all of that. But when you come from a place of fear like this way, you can't necessarily see the rationality in front of you. As long as this occupation continues, as long as the settlers in the West Bank continue to do what they're doing, that should have been stopped a long time ago. And yet it hasn't. It's just increased. It's expanded under the right-wing governments. They've been encouraging it. And let me be clear, the terrorists act like the Israeli settlers act like terrorists as well. They do terrorist acts. So it's
a fuck about anti-Semitism.
No, they don't.
The Israeli government, the right-wing Israeli government doesn't.
They weaponize it.
Anti-Semitism, because you know how I know this? Because they're pals with all the fucking fascist
white
US,
supremacists. You're right.
The white nationalist fascist politicians in the US. Yeah. This is like they don't give a fuck about anti-Semitism. They're ethno-nationalists. That's it. That's the alliance.
I agree with you. That is the alliance. It's disturbing, and you're not wrong. Walker, can you hang out to do right-wing roundup, or do you have to jam?
I got to head.
All right. So thank you for joining us. Colin, was there any super chat questions or anything for Walker before he jumped ship here? I'm guessing no.
Nah, I think you're caught up.
All right, right on. Thank you. All right, Walker, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a very interesting conversation, as it always is. Thank you for the work you do with Dark Money. Where can people find your work? I know important context, opt-outs. Explain to people where to find all that.
So you can subscribe for our money and politics reporting at importantcontext.news. That'll keep you up to date on the bad actors. You can follow me on Blue Sky or Threads. I'm trying to transition off of Twitter because
I'm totally off Twitter now. I feel
I think the platform is kind of dying, but Threads is where they now have GIFs and cool.
Wait, GIFs? Wait, you did mention GIFs.
They have GIFs, but they also have this really cool feature. And I'm sorry to the person in the EU who said that they don't have it.
Well, that's why I haven't downloaded it, because it's against the privacy laws. Nobody in the EU can download it.
You can dictate your post, and it will play the audio of you doing it as the
that's kind of cool,
and it will transcribe it very accurately, which makes me very mad at Apple's
transcription software.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Like Threads transcription software is pretty incredible. So I think that like the speaking things, being able to hear somebody's thought in their voice, catch their inflection, catch the tone, Like, I think that's very important. So I'm trying to do more of that
Interesting.
on
All right.
Threads. So yeah.
All right. I'll keep my eyes peeled on that.
Yeah.
All right, Walker, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. It was a great conversation.
Yep.
Have a fantastic weekend.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, folks, I want to turn now. My entire right-wing insanity roundup this week is dedicated to the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson, because Mike Johnson is an extremist, hyper-religious, hyper anti-homophobic viewpoints. He is now serving as the Republican Speaker of the House. After much back and forth on all the voting, he is who persevered. So the first thing I wanted to bring up was this is a report from Media Matters for America. So this is basically focusing on all his anti-LGBTQ rhetoric that he has been spouting for the last few years. So mainstream media should report on new Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson's extensive history of anti-LGBTQ extremism. You're right, they should be. And this is getting very little coverage. And it matters right now because we do have an increase of homophobic hate crimes in the country. It's rearing its ugly head again, and it's become quite common. We see it with school board attacks where they're trying to change the narrative there. We see it with the bathroom, going to the right bathroom, correct bathroom, quote unquote, bills and whatnots that have been going across the country. So Johnson has deep ties to anti-LGBTQ groups such as ADF and FRC and has repeatedly argued against marriage equality. We just talked about this with Walker. What does it look like when you have an outsized judicial arm that's not being checked by our legislative branches, and they want to overturn gay marriage laws? We've already seen Roe v. Wade disappear, and so I think it's a real possibility that they go after gay marriage. Newly elected Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Republican Louisiana, has a decades-long record of working with extreme anti-LGBTQ organizations, championing anti-LGBTQ legal efforts and sponsoring regressive anti-LGBTQ laws. While mainstream media have focused on Johnson's role in promoting former President Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results, their coverage has left out vital context on the new speaker's history of opposing these sorts of rights. And I think this is true. You see a lot of attention being given to the election fraud stuff, which I'm not saying is bad. That should be discussed as well. But I think this is also important context. So let's take a look at, they have a whole list here. The ADF, previously Alliance Defense Fund, say that 5 times fast, is an extreme anti-LGBTQ group that champions right-wing causes under the guise of religious liberty. ADF's powerful global network of over 3,000 allied attorneys have often taken up government positions. Over 100 elected officials across local, state, and federal governments have connections to the group. ADF has historically supported the criminalization of sodomy, and the group was involved in cases that overturned Roe v. Wade and ruled in favor of discriminating against LGBTQ couples and individuals. Johnson served as a senior attorney, national media spokesman, and allied attorney for ADF for nearly a decade. So not only is he affiliated with this group, he was an attorney for them. While at ADF, Johnson repeatedly argued against a New Orleans effort to extend health insurance benefits to same-sex partners of municipal employees. So you're getting the picture here. He's very much homophobic. After the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Texas sodomy law in 2003, Johnson penned an editorial for Louisiana newspaper claiming, by closing these bedroom doors, they have opened a Pandora's box. That's absolutely batshit crazy. What Pandora's box? I mean, people are allowed to do in their bedrooms what they're allowed to do, right? That's the privacy of their own home. You would think people on the far right who are often talking about having civil liberties would understand that. But I think with this particular group, Christian nationalists, they want their religious law to be actual government law. While at ADF, Johnson published additional columns calling homosexuality inherently unnatural, a dangerous lifestyle, and a bizarre choice, while also claiming that marriage equality is a darker harbinger of chaos and sexual anarchy that could doom even the strongest republic. I don't know what sexual anarchy is. I don't know. Could be fun. I don't know what he means there. Johnson also championed ADF's Day of Truth event for students who believed that LGBTQ identities are sinful. In 2004, Johnson defended Louisiana's amendment banning marriage equality in front of the state's Supreme Court. All right, so you get the picture here. That is who this guy is. So for this reason, he has been heavily sponsored and promoted by Christian nationalists in the country. So I wanted to play a clip from David Barton where he's talking about Mike Johnson as being a God guy, not a good guy, a God guy. So let's go ahead and play this clip.
And founder of wallbuilders.com and Victory News contributor David Barton is very familiar with the new speaker. We spoke to him recently right after Mike Johnson was elected on the House floor.
Yeah, we know Mike very well. We've been friends for years. Mike is the guy that has been a leader and a fighter in really the conservative, Christian, pro-life, pro-marriage movement. I think Mike has a better grounded biblical worldview. That's really clear with the way he thinks and speaks. He understands the history of America, the history of the institutions. He understands religion and morality is the basis of political prosperity, as George Washington said in his farewell address. He has that view of history that is really unique. There's not that many people who understand American history from the founders' perspective and what they intended. So he's very good at that.
All right, David Barton, we thank you for your insight into somebody that you know well, who's now the Speaker of the House. Gotta like that.
You gotta love it. This is the God guy, and we thank God for putting the God guy in at this time in our history. It's a really good thing.
Bring up here religious morality as the basis for everything. So these guys oftentimes refer to the founding fathers of having this set in place a belief system that's based on Christian values, based on biblical teaching. This is absolutely not the case. There's a reason we have separation of church and state in the country. It's a requirement if you want to have tolerance. The country was based on religious tolerance. That means that other people are allowed to practice what their beliefs are. And in exchange for that, you get to practice what your beliefs are. The minute you have one belief system dictating the law, that's over. It's done. So forget about it. And there's no way you could have civil liberties with any sort of religious ethno-state. So again, that's a problem. I want to turn a little bit more to who David Barton is so people understand who this guy is. I want to play this clip about, well, let's just play and then we'll talk about it.
There's a really interesting map that came out in 1888. This is a map that was used in public schools, and it talked about the two colonies founded in America. You see at the bottom colony, 1619 Project. Well, that was founded in 1607, but that's what 1619 Project points to is Jamestown. And then 1620 is the Pilgrims. Now, if you can see where that ship is down by 1619 Jamestown, there's a circle there right by that ship, and it's a little hard to read. You got to get close. But there's a circle right there. And when you get close, if you can see what it says mammon. What is mammon? Money. This is a colony founded on money, economic colony. And look what came out of that colony. Avarice and lust and ignorance and superstition and rebellion and secession. And you got things like the Dred Scott decision, Kansas-Nebraska Act, all these negative things. That's what swept across the South. That's where the biggest slavery thing was, and that impact of Jamestown spread all throughout that area, and it was not a biblical impact. It was a money impact. That's what motivated them to do what they did. Now, if you look at the top one, and by the way, recall that these were professing Christians. All the bad things they did, they were still professing Christianity. But when you go to that top one, you see that top one up there, can you see what it says on the end out there? You see the circle? It says Bible. So that's the colony founded. This is a public school map in 1888. This is the one founded on the Bible, and look at all the good things there. Intelligence, obedience to law, equal rights, love of country, philanthropy, benevolence, happiness, patience, charity, faith, hope, peace, honor, truth, virtue, all that good. That's what swept across the nation. That's what characterized America, was what came out of the Pilgrims, not what came out of Jamestown. What came out of Jamestown is what characterized the 11 states in the South that became the Confederacy. What came out of the Bible is what characterized the rest of the nation that stopped that stuff. And so that's a big difference between the two, and they were biblical Christians. And so the difference between that two, biblical Christians, professing Christians, makes a big difference. As you look at Jamestown, there's not a whole lot to be said positively about them. They were very elitist. They were very socialistic. They were pro-slavery. They were definitely big government, and they were very group conscious. That's the way progressives are.
This is such a hot mess. I just don't even know where to begin with this. So apparently, like the North was biblical and they were anti-slavery, and the Mammon people were in the South, and those were the professing Christians. But the Mammon people, the big government people in the South, they're actually progressives. I mean, none of what this guy says makes sense. I just wanted to play this clip so people could get an idea of where this guy is coming from. He's very much ingrained in the Christian nationalist movement in the country. So on that note, that's all I've got for you guys today. It is a Friday, so go out, have a good time tonight. Spend some time with your family and friends over the weekend, recharging your battery. Colin, was there any other super chats that we missed? I just want to make sure. Hi, Colin.
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple actually.
All right, let's bring them up.
First,
Mr. Anderson, Status Coup new memberships. Oh, this is very exciting. Thank you for joining us. We are funded mainly by our memberships. No, 100% by our memberships. We don't take corporate funding, obviously. So $5 a month, that is what pays our bills. That's what allows us to travel and cover various things. We are still going to be looking at the UAW strike. That is not over. I know that they're in negotiations right now as we speak, trying to reach a deal, but we are definitely keeping our eyes on that and other, workers' rights movements that are boiling up across the country. So thank you, Mr. Anderson. We appreciate that. Then we have Doug Jeffrey. Threads reports women who seek abortions in states where it has been made illegal. Wait, hang on. Threads reports women who seek abortions in this is a privacy issue. Sorry, Doug. I totally get that now. That took me a hot second. So you're basically saying that if there's these sort of what they're calling abortion tourism, I have no fucking idea who came up with that concept, that name. It's ridiculous. But if you leave a state where abortion is now made illegal and you go to another state to get care, like i.e. California, it's legal here. They're calling that abortion tourism, and they're trying to create laws that would criminalize women that are doing that. So if you pass through another state, you can get picked up and it's a felony charge. So apparently Threads has been reporting these women. I'm assuming they're using their DMs, their private messaging to communicate with each other, and they're spying on them and turning them over to these state governments. If that is happening, that is absolutely disgusting. And I'm assuming that it is happening because Doug has seen it, report on it. That's awful. So that's bad. Yeah. Also, folks, have better operation security. If you're doing something like that, don't communicate on Facebook or any of these other things too, because it is possible that they could subpoena those records and have those conversations to prosecute you with. All right. Thank you for pointing that out, Doug. Appreciate that. Took me a second to understand what you were saying, but I get it. That's bad. Chris Garrett, $5. Thank you so much, Chris, the OG. Thank you, Tina, for having a sane discussion in an insane world. Coup Heart. Thank you, Chris. We try. Nuance has kind of been lost out there. And so many of these complex world problems we are facing are very much nuanced because there's so many things at play. And not everything's black and white. People have different belief systems in all of these countries that we're dealing with. It's not this monolithic group known as the Ukrainians or the Israelis or the Iraqis or, the British, right? These are complex countries that have a whole entire swath of beliefs inside of them in the way we do here in the United States. If I, sit here and I criticize either George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, Obama, like any of these folks, does that make me un-American? No, of course it doesn't. Nobody would consider that to be the case. That is what we should be doing when somebody is doing something corrupt or wrong or has a bad idea, right? That's the whole reason the First Amendment exists. But oftentimes we forget that about other countries, and we try to make things, sort of like about team sports. So again, I always do my best to do that. I don't always get it right, but I try. So I appreciate that, Chris Garrett. All right, folks, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining me on Right Wing Insanity Report, and have a fantastic weekend.